Ireland's identity is rooted in its traditions: music, dance, language, culture. When those ancient traditions began to fade, the stewards, pipers, and musicians took note, and Comhaltas was born. Those traditions are without genetic or geographical borders, embraced by those who identify as Irish, and adopted by those who are not Irish. We are the stewards of those traditions. We are the Northeast region, Comhaltas Kiltory Éireann in America.
Dawn and star na heron in a fréamh na searchar. Ceoil, Rinka, Changa, Ilwint. Nor a tussy na seanchas trégan, na muera, Pibra agus Kiltory, hug siad fui suntas. Agus rugu era Comhaltas. Being the seanchas seo gan géinteach nó geograthach, bhí barag a thur mar na daoine a aithint mar Éireannach. Agus glach thugit mar na daoine nach Éireannach. Táimid na muera na seanchas sin. Táimid réigiún Éireoiscát.
We're a diverse group of branches extending over an area larger than Ireland, from Connecticut to Massachusetts, west through New York and the Mohawk Valley, ultimately ending in Buffalo. We are both rural and urban, and we come together in kinship to promote Irish culture. As Irish immigrants adapted to their new world, they searched for ways to bridge the gap between the old and the new. For many, musicians filled that gap. Irish musicians in the United States organized into associations with various degrees of structure, and their purpose was simple: music and social interaction. They gathered to play some tunes, have a jar, and get a lead on, well, any number of things. There was always a question about news from home. Have you heard about? In this segment, we recognize and celebrate our founders, bringing Irish traditional culture to our communities. By doing so, they bridged the gap between the old and the new. Their stories are similar within our cities and towns, yet each are unique. All their stories are worth telling. Musicians gathered informally in sessions and more formally in bands to play their tunes. Irish musicians moved to western Massachusetts and Connecticut, and they were no different. Paul Curry and his brother Johnny and Eddie Burke arrived in the 1950s from the west coast of Ireland. Eddie played the melodeon before switching to the fiddle. Paul played the bodhrán and was a great set dancer. They were instrumental in organizing the Traditional Irish Musicians Association in Connecticut, and you could often find them playing at Boyle O'Reilly's Club in Springfield, Massachusetts. The group was active. There were sessions, dances, concerts. They even hosted a Fleadh Cheoil. Bill McAvoy approached the musicians organization and encouraged them to join Comhaltas. Mary Burke and Tim O'Brien joined the musicians in working out details, and the Curry-Siri branch was established on April 6, 1974, named to honor one of the founders of Comhaltas. Paul Curry was the first chairman, with Pat McMahon, Michael Curry, and Eamon Cronin serving in other positions, all from County Clare. Mary Burke would round out the board as delegate. Paul Curry would later serve as Northeast Regional Coordinator for 9 years. He also was chairman of the annual Comhaltas Concert Tour and a promoter of theater and musical productions. It was a great fundraiser. As founding and dedicated members, Eddie and Mary Burke shaped and energized the branch for decades. In 1987, Donegal fiddle player P.V. O'Donnell and his wife Marion moved to Connecticut. Very quickly, Peavy transformed the Irish music landscape when he became active in the Comhaltas branch, teaching fiddle at all levels. He played for a standing room only weekly session at the Steam City Brewery in downtown Hartford, often with close to 30 musicians and friends such as Eddie Burke on fiddle and Tom Walsh on button accordion. When Paul Curry passed, the branch was rededicated and became the Curry-Siri branch. In April 1994, under the leadership of Joan Kennedy, the now Curry-Siri branch celebrated its 20th anniversary. The program for that evening expressed appreciation for the many who had made the event possible and for those who had served as chairpersons. In a letter from Joan Kennedy, she talked about strength, vision, heritage, and Irishness. The branch continued to host many festivals, sessions, classes, concerts, and dances. We know this because of the old branch newsletters. Once a resource for the members, it now is a historical record. In the newsletter, you could find lessons in music, language, singing, ceilidh and set dancing, any number of Irish radio shows, and several Comhaltas events scheduled over a 6-month period. The names of new members were listed in welcome. You could even find a few accordions for sale, Paolo Soprani, BC, in perfect shape. All published by editor Jim Smith from Newington, Connecticut. It's hard to say what plans a young Larry Reynolds had when he arrived in Boston in 1954 from County Galway. But we do know that he connected with the active Irish music scene, met a young Phyllis Priest, with whom he married and started a family. Looking back over his first 20 years in Boston, it's easy to see how his life had been influenced by music. He played whenever he could with multiple bands, the Tara Band, Connacht Ceilidh, and at sessions and private events. But his favorite venue was the house party. As the family grew, his children would join in. The Reynolds family would often host visiting musicians, those who were casually passing through, and those from the many Comhaltas concerts tours coming from Ireland. John Curran, Mary and Pat Barry, and Larry worked to establish the Hanafin-Cooley branch, and in 1975 that became a reality. From the beginning, the branch's focus was on the music, and so it was named for 2 musicians, Michael Hanafin, a fiddle player from County Kerry, and Joe Cooley, an accordion player from Galway. Monthly branch sessions were held at VFW Post 669 on Cambridge Street in Brighton, before moving across the river to the Canadian American Club in Watertown. But for those without cars, both locations were convenient to public transportation. From the start, the branch grew rapidly, with boundless energy and many willing volunteers. Hanafin-Cooley promoted Irish traditional music on many stages and to many audiences. In 1976, with an eye on the future, Seamus Connolly was invited to Boston to teach fiddle. Seamus is an All-Ireland champion from County Clare and would be the first of more than a few teachers. Soon, Dennis Galvin would arrive from New York. Monday night sessions began at the Village Coach House, creating yet another audience for Irish music. In 1980, Boston Comhaltas musicians, under the guidance of Larry Reynolds and Seamus Connolly, produced an LP which proclaimed loudly, unequivocally, "We're Irish still. I still have my autographed copy."
The names of Hanafin-Cooley are synonymous with Irish traditional music. The branch of Comhaltas Cheoil in Boston, which is dedicated to the memory of these great musicians, is synonymous with all that is best in the Irish character. This LP, in many ways, is a tribute to all musicians in Boston and throughout the world.
In 1984, John Curran asked Larry if he was interested in taking over a radio show featuring Irish traditional music. The answer was yes. Together with his son Sean, they would broadcast on WNTN 1150 for over 20 years, further expanding his audience.
Seamus was involved in it, but I used to run the board for them while they used to pick out the album, like while they played the music, and then it became my dad's and mine program. He used to write everything out, and I mean, it was to a T. He would write who he's going to talk about, what commercials he was going to do, which the commercials were just telling about dances in the area. It wasn't, we never got paid for commercials, but he used to love to talk, and I would always like, Dad, come on, move along. It was good because we played a lot of music. At first it was all albums, and we used to buy the albums, and over the years we collected quite a library, and he would put on, like for an example, a polka or something, just to switch it up, and I'd be like, no, Jesus, Dad, put a reel on or something, and I'd always try to switch it up on him, and just having fun throughout the whole program, and it was a fun time. It was a nice time to be with him, and I was always learning from him too because of the music and who he knew, and it was amazing in the stories that he would have.
In 1986, there was a pivotal moment from a brief conversation at a social dance, and so Irish set dancing was married to the music at the monthly events.
But we were at a dance in Holy Name that was a monthly
Parish dance, yeah.
Parish dance, and there's a whole group of us that went. That was the kind of dancing, was regular dancing, waltzing, quick steps, that type of thing, and there was no set dancing around. And so one particular night we were there, and Terry McCarthy came in to the dance, and he was bursting, really, and he says, Sally, oh God, he says, I have something to tell you. He says, I just got back from Ireland. Sally, you should see the set dancing.
It was a move that would change the Irish landscape of the Utica, Rome area when Frank and Pat Dugan moved from the Bronx, but not immediately. There was a matter of 6 children to raise. But once that was handled, the Dugans were able to turn their mutual attention to Irish culture. They were intent on establishing a cultus branch in Utica and approached Jim O'Looney as an accordion player from County Kerry, living in Utica. Pat, a librarian at Utica College, was already connecting with students who were interested in traditional Irish culture. She taught tin whistle classes. A small branch opened consisting of 6 members. At their annual general meeting in 1980, the name was chosen for the branch was Hanafin-Cooley, or Little Branch. Pat and Frank continued to offer language and tin whistle lessons at Utica College. Even with the yearly student turnover, membership doubled into the 20s. The Dugan home became the meeting place on Thursday night for music practice. Reaching out to a larger community, the branch musicians played for several area nursing homes, coffee houses, and church groups. The branch's first and only cultus wedding to date occurred in September of 1984 when Chris Fox and Mike Hope were married. Jack and Vicki Pendergast were 2 new members who would make a big impact on cultus at every level. Jack used his talents to promote the Little Branch to the greater community. He also brought the cultus tour group, A Glimpse of the Real Ireland, to the Stanley Theatre in Utica. The group played before a crowd of over 700 people in 1987. Sponsorship of this cultus tour generated interest and increased membership. Kevin and Ann Kearney, new members, offer Cayley dancing on Friday nights. Jack would go on to become a leader in cultus as Northeast Regional Chair and Provincial Secretary. Thursday night sessions moved to the home of Jack and Vicki Pendergast. The branch continued to showcase Irish music by sponsoring Comhaltas tour performances through the 80s and early 90s. Hanafin-Cooley branch assisted with the formation of the Albany and Rochester branches. What happens when Linda and Martin Lydon visit Pat and Frank Dugan at the same time Bill McAvoy is visiting? What you might expect. Albany was a city with many Irish immigrant families, but Irish traditional music was limited. That was about to change. The first meeting of the Albany branch was held on October 14, 1984, at the home of the Lydons. About 8 people were in attendance, many who would play a role in the branch and remain members to this day. Martin and Linda Lydon, Steve Schreiber, Kathy Clark, Tim Finley, and Lenny Broyles. Tim was a well-known local uilleann piper and penny whistle player. He and fiddler Lenny Broyles would inspire and attract players of traditional Irish music to the branch sessions. The name given to the branch was Fenn-O'Grady, name suggested by Anne-Marie McLaughlin to honor the Irish composer. Initially, there were 2 traditional Irish music sessions per month at the Lydon home. In 1985, attendance eventually increased to about 40 players per session. The venue would change to the Hibernian Hall, free and open to all. The monthly sessions have been central to the branch, offering music, conversation, and refreshments. The opening slow session draws a faithful crowd, building a growing repertoire of tunes. The regular session follows with a selection of tunes collected over the years, favorites, and new ones that become favorites. All are welcome, always. Set dancing was added to the branch calendar. Early teachers were friends, members and founders of Connecticut's Curry-Siri branch. Eddie Burke, his wife Mary, and set dance teacher Paul Curry. They were followed by Brendan Brown. The branch offered a selection of Irish arts to the Albany area. Irish language lessons, ceilidh, and storytelling. And Albany became a stop for annual concerts by the North American tour of Comhaltas musicians from Ireland in the late 80s. Before email and social media, the newsletter was the best means to communicate all these events, as well as news happening within the Northeast region with all of the members and their friends. Kathy Clark, Mary Beth Vogt, and Colleen O'Sullivan all contributed as editors. Many of our musicians were also our teachers. Tim Finley on uilleann pipes and whistle, Lenny Broyles on fiddle, and later, All-Ireland flute champion Mike McHale on flute and whistle. Also teaching were John Joe Callanan on accordion, Jimmy Kelly on ceilidh drums, Monsignor Charlie Cohen, concertina, flute, whistle, and song, Jim Mara, accordion, and Noel Higgins, also accordion. Monsignor Charlie Cohen's concert series included sessions at the Rhinecliff Hotel in the Catskills, and they gave us almost 20 years of exposure to wonderful Native Irish and Irish American musicians and singers. It's not too often our founders are available to discuss the early days of the branch and to share the decision-making process of joining Comhaltas. Ted McGraw was one of the founders of the Tom Finucane branch, and it seems that there was some initial resistance.
We had been meeting at the Harps Club out on Buffalo Road there for a number of years, but it was always kind of haphazard. Usually on a Friday night, mostly on Fridays, some of the musicians would stop in and be there to play a couple tunes and, have a little chat. And but you never know who's going to show up or if anybody was going to show up. So around about August of '73, I was took a little survey of some other guys and said, why don't we get together and we'll set a night. We'll set it once a month when we know we're going to be here. And Tommy Finucane at the time lived fairly close. he was the guy that had the key and opened up on Fridays. So we knew it was going to be open, and we picked the second Friday of the month. And at that time, there was like at least 10 native-born traditional musicians in Rochester. So I sent out a little letter to them and explaining what we were going to do and the date we'd picked. And we'd like to organize a little musicians group. And it went from there. I mean, the thing everybody was very much in favor of it. And we never formed any kind of a formal organization type of thing. Mm-hmm. Mainly because nobody wanted to do it. We got together to play the music and, and talk about it and nobody wanted to be a chairman or nobody wanted to be a secretary, or we didn't have any need for having a treasurer. So we went along with the Dan McGrath rules of the day and didn't bother with any of that stuff. So actually we did form some people who had an interest in say, well, we got to have some officers. But we never really paid much attention to it, as far as officers go or what their duties were or anything like that. So when Bill McAvoy found out about our successful venture up here in Rochester, he was down in Long Island at the time, and he was the Comhaltas representative here in the States. And he started telephoning me and he said, hey, you guys ought to really join Comhaltas. And we said, why? So he kept badgering us anyway. In the meantime, I had looked at the Traditional Irish Musicians Association, who were still going strong at that time. That was the group in Chicago. They also had branches in New York City, I believe. And the opportunity came up when we had this meeting at our house with the McGraths, Pat Carey, Scott Utley, Mike Ryan, and who else? Seems at least those people. And they said, why don't we join Comhaltas? I think we're ready. We'll do the officer stuff. We'll do the work if you'll be the chair. So I got to go to all the meetings. So anyway, we joined Comhaltas at that time, and Jack Pendergast, who was how was Jack at that time? This was before the provincial level started. So Jack was the secretary of the musicians groups that were in upstate New York and New England. He came up to Rochester and checked us out, as well as Pat Dugan from Utica. She was involved. And we got an official certificate from Comhaltas when they accepted the Rochester branch in to Comhaltas organization. Went from there. I started going to the meetings. They had the first North American meeting down in New York City, and that was most interesting to go down there and meet the people and see who else was involved in organizations in New York and in Boston and up and down the line. Yeah, that was probably the main thrill of that, is meeting other musicians and find out what they were doing all over the country.
The Tom Finucane branch, also known as the Rochester Irish Musicians Organization, continues in promoting Irish culture in Rochester and beyond by leading weekly and monthly sessions, including several that have run for decades, hosting concerts that feature local, regional, and international musicians, performing and teaching at community events and festivals, organizing weekly set dance classes and regular K-Leagues, and sharing Ted McGraw's historic Irish Party House radio show. The idea of establishing a branch in Buffalo started in Monkstown, County Dublin, with an American studying at UCD, the University of Dublin. Brendan Brown, with his wife Glenda, will tell the story in their own words and talk about some of the people they met along the way.
I was studying at UCD back in the mid-'80s, and just because I was interested in Irish music and things like that, I would go out to the Culterlawn in Monkstown, the Comhaltas headquarters, and they had great ceilidhs there, and a lot of fun and atmosphere and great music. And I just started trying to learn some of the ceilidh dances. And at one of those Friday night ceilidhs, Connie Ryan, I met Connie Ryan, and he suggested that we come out to his set dancing class in Churchtown. The next Tuesday, found ourselves in Churchtown learning set dancing. And so when I came back to Buffalo in '86 or so, I was looking around for some set dancing in this region or this area, and there was nothing. And that's when I stumbled upon Jim Brennan's group, the Irish Cultural and Folk Art Association, at the Buffalo Irish Center. And his group was promoting ceilidh dancing. They had an adult group of ceilidh dancers. We would compete at the Buffalo Fesh, or maybe the Rochester Fesh, and do little performances in the area around St. Patrick's Day. Mary Hennigan was a mover and shaker at the Irish Center in South Buffalo. I don't know exactly what her official title was, but she was the person who got things done at the Irish Center. So yeah, I started teaching my own set dancing class, I think in '91. And we danced at various places, just a small group of us. Sometimes we'd get 8, sometimes 16. A few times we had maybe 3 sets. So it was, and it was just done word of mouth. We actually started, now that I think of it, we actually started in a friend's living room, Bobby Gannon's living room. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. That was just a little bit before your time, but that was a lot of fun. So anyway, now that we had a public place to dance, we could invite more people. John and Mary Jane Cotter were also instrumental in kind of telling us a little bit about Comhaltas. I think one of their, I'm trying to think exactly who was what connection they had, but I remember they were talking about this convention in Secaucus, New Jersey. They had been to it. They said it was great. There was a lot of ceilidh dancing, and they were, interested in set dancing. They came to my class and were talking about that. I think in '91. So when '92 came around, we all decided we would go to the North American Convention in Montreal that year.
Yeah, and I just started dancing.
And you
in
just
92.
started dancing, yes,
Yep.
exactly. So, and that's how we met. You showed up.
I just saw an ad in one of the Art Voices in Buffalo, and I was planning a trip to Willie Clancy that summer with a good friend of mine, and so looking for some Irish dancing, and he had an ad in the Art Voice and said Irish set dancing, and I'm like, what are the chances that somebody's teaching set dancing in Buffalo?
And there you go. Fast forward to 1992, I guess. We all went to Montreal. Everybody had a great time. I think there were 7 or 8 of us
Right.
in this group.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided when we got back to Buffalo that we needed to get more involved with Comhaltas because of the fun we had. So the set dancing classes continued.
Right. And then we would also go down to the Rochester branch, who had a branch of Comhaltas.
Yes.
And they would have ceilidhs at McGinnity's pub.
Mm-hmm. A few of us joined the Rochester branch.
Yes.
Just in time, I think, for the Syracuse Convention in 1993. And I guess we should talk about that Syracuse Convention. To me, that was still the best convention ever. It was in a small hotel. Comhaltas had the entire hotel. So there was no one to complain about, loud music, too many banjos. There was nothing to complain of. They had a big dance floor, obviously, and when the Ceoil band, who was being paid to play that night, stopped at midnight or 1 o'clock, the dancers didn't stop. Musicians would pop up, start playing, and there would be many sets still going. I think on the Friday or Saturday night, it never stopped. So that's when, okay, we need to do something to bring this to Buffalo, even though some of us were members of the Rochester branch.
Yes.
So you were one of the founding members. Who else?
Well, Bob Williams.
Bob Williams,
who
yeah.
was the first chairman.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mary Hannigan was the vice chair. And she was, of course, offering us a space at the Buffalo Irish Center.
Yeah.
Where we could, where music was already happening. And I believe Margaret McGrath was also teaching her Irish language class there. Jim Brennan was teaching the Ceoil dancing. So it was really the perfect place to start the cultist branch and hopefully being able to spread more of the, the news, because she was such a public figure in the Irish community that she would have, be able to introduce more people to, the goals of cultists, which were the promoting the Irish music, dance, and language. So, it was Bob Williams, Mary Hannigan, who was Jane was the secretary, I believe, maybe.
Yeah, and my father was also involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Joe Brown, yes.
So Martin Wynn, legendary Sligo fiddler. So when I heard he was in Buffalo, after this, I guess a fairly horrific mugging, he had a difficult time recovering from that. At the time he had a sister, Bridget Wynn was in Buffalo, and his nephew, John Daly, was in Buffalo. So he came to Buffalo and was in a nursing home. And a couple of us, Bob Williams, Ed Dillon, and I went to visit him a few times. We brought some instruments, chit-chatted, he played for us. We played a few tunes for him, and I hope that, kind of cheered him up, and I think it did. So when people started forming the branch, I thought, well, we don't really have a native Buffalonian who is a well-known Irish musician. So I think I was the one who suggested we name it after Martin Wynn.